Welcome to part 3. Well, 2.5. Hopefully you saw the little video on the valve clearances. Always a good idea to check those before you stick a new engine in. Anything of Chinese or unknown origin, you know, it doesn't take a minute while it's on the bench. Check your tappets. Peace of mind. So today we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of it. Get it to bits. Get the new engine in. See how it goes. So that's the leg shield off and the auxiliary tank. I'm draining the fuel because I'm going to change the carburettor back to the Chinese one. So while that's draining, I'll whip the air filter off. That's a nice easy job. A couple of 10 mils. And a Phillips screw, or Japanese industry standard screw, JIS. So it's just these two bolts to take the air filter off, or the air box I should say, containing the air filter. Those two bolts and a screw on the back of the carburettor for the intake. You have to have the steering on full lock to get that out because it's quite a tight fit. There, it's out. So there's your airbox and this rubber gasket thing that goes on there. We'll put that to one side. So the fuel's just about drained. Now let's get the carburettor off. Just unscrew the slide. Take that out. I'll reuse that in the new carburettor. Just because the Honda needle is a much more nicely machined. You know, it's a more accurately machined part than the Chinese one. Choke cable. That's simple, just pull that out of there. That's those two out of the way. I'll take the carburettor off now. On the Japanese ones they have a heater. So we'll unplug that. That's those two wires. You might not have them unless you've got a Japanese import like me. Get those out of the way. So the wires, we'll unplug those while we're here. So there's two multi-pin plugs. You've got the one from the stator, the main multi-plug from the stator, and the neutral light switch. Now these two are the electric start, which I had to modify to fit the Chinese starter. Yep, that's those two there. We'll deal with the wiring later. So let's get the carburettor off. if you're just changing the engine and leaving your carburettor on there, you can just undo the two carburettor bolts and leave the carburettor in place. You don't even need to take the choke or anything off. I'll get this carburettor off. And these original hoses are a really tight fit. Bear with. This petrol going to gush everywhere. Probably. Not too much. Always good practice to have plenty of rags lying around. I'll get the fuel pipe out of the way. Get the carburettor off. I'll take it off at the manifold because just loosen that while we're here, but leave that attached to the manifold. Yeah, just little 8mm bolts. So the horn is attached on the other side. I'll just unplug that for now. That's the horn wiring. Yeah, the horn is on a little bracket that bolts to the manifold. We'll probably reuse this original manifold, to be honest. Save a lot of grief. Oh, that's the carburettor off. Didn't really want it to come off as abruptly as that, but it's off. And it's full of fuel, so we need to just pour that into the fuel container. So on the right hand side of the machine we need to take the exhaust system off. Just pull the plug cap while we're here. So we've got two 10mm going into the engine. I use stainless bolts on, stainless nuts on here, so they don't seize up. So those two off, and there are two 12s behind here. God, who did those up? They were tight. Hopefully they come off when you do yours. You can always take it off there. I just find it easier to do these because handling the exhaust with that bracket on it doesn't always go back on so easily. It's easier to line these two up. That's the way I do it anyway. So there's my two 12mm for that. And that's the exhaust off. I'll give that a good clean while it's off. So while we're around the right hand side, this is the brake light switch, the rear brake light switch. You can see the springs. So we need to disconnect that spring from that engine mounting bolt. It's got the bolt has got a little pip on the end for the hook spring to hook into. So before you can get the engine out, you need to just whip that spring off. So we're around the right hand side now, the chain side. Just out of interest, that is a really good tool to get yourself. It's just a spring puller. Great for pulling that brake light spring off. Now we're going to whip the chain guard off. Get the good old nut gun out, save a bit of time. Because we've got to mess about with the chain. Just to get the chain tension right. There's the chain guard out of the way. Not too bad. Take the gear lever off. Sprocket cover. The resident chimp must have done that one up. And my sprocket cover, I'm going to reuse this, and I will be using my alternator. You can see the paint's all come off with petrol dripped on it. I'll give that a quick coat of paint before it goes back on. Let's get the sprocket off. Which, if you're interested, I do actually have a 16 on there. It's one bigger than standard. So I think the 17 will be a good call on the new engine, because it's got that much more power. Well, relatively speaking, it's only about 2 horsepower, if that, but it's a lot more torque. It's a good 20% more power and torque, which when you're only talking about 6-7 horsepower is quite a lot. So that's the wiring disconnected, the chain disconnected, exhaust off. We could take the footrest bar off. You can leave that on to help getting the engine out, you know, something to grab when you're undoing that engine. So the only thing holding the engine in now is that bolt there, and that one down there. They're 14mm this end, the other side is a 12mm. So that's it, it's just those two, and we'll take the footrest bar off first. God, it's a mess under here. Just undo those 4 bolts. Get the footrest bar off, and I'll put I've got a little jack I've made to put under there to take the weight. So I'll get this footrest bar off. There are 4 12mm underneath, fairly short 12mm bolts. Nice and easy, they should come off alright. Just those little babies. God, that last one was tight. Right, that's that off. So we can undo the engine bolts now. Now where you removed the spring earlier, there's a 14mm nut, and if you're lucky the other side won't spin while you take that nut off. If it does, you have to reach over and hold it. It's a little bit awkward. Get that nut off, and the spring's in the way as well, and the kickstart. Get that nut off. See, that's the nut off. It's got a little tiny washer on there as well. So that bolt on mine anyway, it will just slide out now. You can slide that one out. So that's your lower engine mount done. The top one, so this is all that's holding the engine in now, that one bolt. That's literally it. So we'll go around the other side because we need to we can do it from this side, I suppose. So what I've done, I've made this out of an old car jack. Just welded a couple of plates on it. Comes in extremely useful for jobs like this. Use this to take the weight. You can just use blocks of wood, or if you've got a strong helper, just get somebody to hold it for you while you pull the bolts out. So that bolt should come out now. Pull that top bolt out. So now there's nothing holding that engine in. Let it down on the jack. And there we have it, that's the engine out. So we can lift it off and get it on the bench. Mind your back when you do this, because these are quite heavy. Now I'm going to swap the alternators over. So I've got the Honda one on here without the bullet connectors. I'm hoping this gasket survives. It has, that's good. Yeah, we'll stick that on the other engine. Put the Honda one. Put that to one side. We've got the Honda one here. Now that's the neutral light switch. On this engine we've got multiple wires. I can only assume there are 5 wires there. I can only assume that's like a gear position indicator to show all the gears and neutral. So I've got to join the little Honda wire. So what I'll do, I'll just cut that, and it's got a green and red there, or green and brown. I'll just join those two together. I'll do that in a minute. Let's get this on first. Oh, it looks exactly the same as the Lifan one, but with the Honda cover, that looks a lot better, doesn't it? It's got a little dowel in there, or 2 dowels actually. Yeah, it's handy the gasket survived, because it's hard to get that gasket on its own, and you have to buy a whole set, which is about 15 quid. Get that back on. Yeah, it looks original now, doesn't it? Got to solder these little wires together. That's it. A little bit of tape. Call that good. I think that's all good. I mustn't forget to give that a coat of paint before it goes back on, but that's a job for later anyway. So the engine is now ready to go in. Let's get it on the bench. Oh, I've got our engine on the homemade jack. Make sure no wiring is going to get trapped. I'll take that up. It's certainly a lot easier with this little jack. If you've got a helper, you can do it without. There's nothing in the way. We're nearly there. So I can see the top one is lined up. We'll get the top one in first and then let the engine swing down to line up with the bottom one. So the top bolt is the one without the pip on it. Let's get that top one in. That's it, that was easy. So the top bolt is in. Get that nut on there. Obviously don't tighten it up yet. There is no washer on the top one. And just let it down and till it swings in place to get the second bolt in. So the bottom bolt is the one with a little pip on it. It takes the spring. That's gone through right behind the, really awkwardly behind the brake return spring, but that's okay. So we can let the jack down and get the jack out of the way. And there you have it, we're in. Get that little spring washer on there. And up. Do the bolts up now. Yeah, the bottom one is awkward with that brake spring, but I wouldn't take it off because it's an absolute bastard to get that little spring back on the switch. Right, yeah, nice and tight. Put the kickstart on. It's just a 10mm, nice and easy. The kickstart in place. So what we can do now, we can put the footrest bar back on, or we put the exhaust on. Now let's get that spring back on there before we go any further, before it gets forgotten. It's the brake spring back on. Now the footrest bar I've had to modify, because I've had one of these in here before to try. I had to modify this part here of the footrest to clear this case, because this case is a different shape to the Honda one. They do sometimes you can get these Lifans with the earlier type case with a cutout up here, and that will clear the exhaust and the case, which is a little bit bigger. Time to fit the exhaust. I've given it a clean. I'm going to fit a new gasket, new exhaust gasket. Stick that in the exhaust port. The exhaust will fit through this gap. There's one of the studs in the holes at the back. Easy peasy. You can see my modified footrest bar just fits through that gap. I'm glad I did that, because I wouldn't want to be messing about with it now. So there's our two. I might put a little bit of grease on these exhaust bolts. So the two bolts at the back, I'll just put a bit of grease on them. And if you're fitting a 125, this exhaust does fit, but you do have to modify this rear hanger a bit, because the cylinder is very slightly longer, or the angle is different. I'm not sure which. So the holes don't line up. It's very close, but not close enough to go in, so you have to file the holes out in this bracket at the back. So I wouldn't recommend using this exhaust on a 125. It does work, I know, I've tried it, but it gets hot and you don't get the full performance. You know, you're risking overheating your engine, and these things get hot enough as it is without making things worse. I could put an oil cooler on this, and it is something I will probably do in the future. What have we done with our bolts for the nuts for the stud? We've got some domed nuts to go on the exhaust studs. I had them just now and now I've lost them. Bloody typical. If you've got some, put a bit of copper slip on these little domed nuts, or just a little dab on the stud. Because they get really hot and the copper slip won't burn off, so you can get these off again in the future. So they're 10mm. Make sure you do them up nice and evenly. And I'm going mad with it because you've got quite a soft, expandable washer stroke gasket, that copper gasket. So I'm not going to go mad with that. Okay, that's done. So we're 3/4 of the way there. What should we tackle next? The spark plug wire could go back on. I think I'll use the spark plug that came with it, because I have used those before and they're actually okay. So I'll do the sprocket now. So we decided on the 17 to try. These are easy to change, aren't they? So it doesn't matter if it's no good. I've loosened the back wheel and just pushed it forward a bit. Gives us plenty of slack in the chain. Get that in there. See how easy they are, they're a piece of cake. Just have to turn that slightly on the spline. That's the sprocket on. Just have to adjust that up a bit and tighten the back wheel. So we're going to turn our attention to the electrics now. Because we changed the alternator, that is now not a problem. Just plug that straight in. And the neutral wire. So now we've just got the two starter motor wires to worry about. So this one off the starter, we've got a dirty great ring terminal on there, so that's no good. Now that is the positive. And it's got a little ring terminal on the other end, so we could just make a new wire for that. and then we've got to make an earth wire as well. I might nick the earth wire I made off the other engine when we did the starter motor conversion. So it turns out the wire I made for the starter conversion on the other engine will fit straight onto this one, same as the earth. But obviously you'll have to make these yourself. Just put a spade terminal on each end, on the earth, on the positive, to fit inside your block. So that's the negative, ground, and that's the positive. I've put an insulating sleeve on there just so that they don't touch. You don't want those touching, so they're not going to touch. So we'll connect that one to the starter, that one to earth. Easy peasy. I have to stop saying that, won't I, because it's not always easy. Let's go around the other side to do that. So we don't need that one. Back a bit. And that goes behind the terminal, and the thread is on that piece. And you've got this dinky little screw. Hope I don't drop it. And I'll push that cover back over. That's that done. Put the earth around here. And that can go on one of the mounting bolts. Good job I've got this little nut spinner, saves so much time. So that's the electrics done. Shovel that back in there. So the only two wires left here are the horn wire. We'll do that when we do the carburettor, and these heater wires, which I'm not bothered about. Obviously meant for like a colder climate than what we've got. Let's turn our attention to the carburettor now, because that is the final piece of the puzzle. We have to go to the bench for that one. So we're back on the bench with the Chinese carburettor. So we've just got to play about with the jets a little bit. We can put this on. You know, we know it works pretty well, it just needed a bigger main jet, which it would do for the 110 anyway. I'll take this slide off because we won't need that. Make sure your work area is clean when you do carburetors. They're quite delicate little things. We didn't want that coming undone. So that's a 7mm, that nut on there. I'm damned if I can see what that is. My eyesight's terrible. So look at the pilot jet. I think the pilot jet is the one out of the old carb. Yeah, it is. I've got some more pilot jets, but I'm not sure if they're going to... I think these are a bit different. They're not going to fit, I don't think. That's too small. I think the thread's too big on that one. Oh, it has got a size on it. It's a 40. Brilliant. We'll stick that one in. It's a bit bigger than the 32. And the main jet. Let's put these back before they get lost and mixed up. Get that out of the way. What I'll do, I'll use my phone. To try and zoom in. It's got a terrific macro feature. I think it says 75, which is way too small. We want about an 85 to start with. That won't be far off, it'll be in the ballpark. Crikey, there's such tiny writing. What's that one? 78. $94. We don't want that, that's way too big. 90. It's going to be the last one, isn't it? 95. The last one. I said it'd be the last one, didn't I? 85. Stick that in. Put it back together and we're done. We can put it on. Get it back on the bike. So I'm going to use the original manifold. Just put a bit of grease on that, helps it seal. The heat insulator has got an O-ring on it, so that goes around that way. Now a manifold with a horn on it can go like that. Because I'm going to use the original air cleaner Blimey, those bolts aren't long enough. I'll have to find some longer bolts. And let's get this carburettor back on. Not forgetting to take our bit of tissue out the inlet. I've done that before, years ago. Left it in there, caused carnage. Luckily our gasket was in good condition, because the gasket supplied is meant for that bigger carburettor. It would have done the job, but it was way too big. This bolt's a bit awkward because of the horn. Connect the horn back up. Make sure all your bolts are tight. So we can connect up the fuel line now. Get that back round. There's always bloody fuel pissing out. Always. It's a really tight fit on there, that is. Now, because we've got a tap, I don't have to put the auxiliary tank on to test it. So we'll put our slide back in. Cutaway faces the back. Get the choke cable on. Make sure the choke works. Throttle operation is good. We're good for a test now. Make sure the wiring's nice and tidy. Yeah, I'll put the fuel back in and we'll stick the key in and see if it goes. So we've hit a potential issue with the gear shift. My C125 gear lever that I really like won't fit anywhere near. It fouls the footrest bar. So I've got the original out, and that won't fit either. So something's changed on this engine. It looks like the gear shift shaft is like an inch longer than the old one. My last Lifan 110 I had, there was no issue here, no issue at all. Don't quite know what we're going to do about that one. Let's have a bit of a cup of coffee and think about it. Like my Cornish mug. My sister Rose gave me that. TG Green. If you know about mugs, they're the best. So what I've done, I've used this crappy gear lever that came with it. Came with the engine. That'll do as a just to get me going until I figure out a workaround. I think I'll have to cut an original lever and re-weld it into the shape I need. There's no easy workaround on that one. So I've put the fuel in the tank. Let's turn the key and see if it starts. Full choke. It's in gear. Yeah, runs as sweet as a nut. So that concludes part 2.5, stroke 3. It's a runner, runs nice and sweet actually. So we've got the gear shift to worry about. Carburation seems pretty good. It ticks over, starts all right. Let it warm up and we'll set the tick over. 17 tooth sprocket is on. So part 4 will be the road test. Let's see what it's like out on the road. Yeah, I'm a bit annoyed about that gear lever. That wasn't an issue on the last one I did, and I don't really know why they've changed that. That shift shaft sticks out. I can see it from here. Sticks out a mile. We'll get to that in part 4. Cheerio. See you on the next one.